Winnipeg's road trip continues through the southern state of Florida, and what a trip it's going to be starting tonight with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Find out what you can expect on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, like I said, we're kicking off with some thoughts ahead of tonight's game against the Lightning. And then, the Jets will also be taking on the Panthers pretty soon here. We'll have some thoughts about that. And also a little bit of a thought about maybe some defensive issues that have started to creep up with some of our more reliable blue liners. But before we dive into all of that, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, like I said, the Jets are going up against Tampa Bay here pretty shortly, and this team is definitely looking a little worse for wear. Still a very strong roster, obviously, but maybe not quite as scary now that Braden Point is sidelined. And Point, obviously, for this team is, there's really no replacing him. He is an absolute beast on offense, whether it's even strength or on the power play. And without him, it's going to be a lot harder for them to generate at 5v5. Not that I think they're going to be toothless because they've still got Gensel, they've still got Cirelli and Kucherov. Make no mistake, still a very dangerous team, just not the level of squad that you would have with Braden in. And I think, pretty much anyone can, admit that, right? We all know that Tampa Bay is one of those, I would say, declining squads. They're having to rely a lot more on middle six and bottom six players to sort of supplement, the departures of guys like Stamkos and other players over the years. So this squad, again, I think it's going to be a difficult game for the Jets. It never is easy against Tampa, but you already saw the Jets put like 6 or 7 past them earlier, right? So at this point, you probably don't worry too much. Up front, they've got Hagel, Cirelli, and Kucherov as your first line. Your second line is Gensel, Paul, and Yzerman. Then you've got Goncalves, Geekie, and Chaffee on the third. And your fourth is Girgensons, Glendening, and Radish. And what I think stands out to me here is that the Jets really have a great chance to take advantage of the bottom three lines. I'm curious to know how the Scheifele line does this evening because the top line has generally been pretty good the last few games. In fact, I would say that in some games they've been excellent, just dominating shifts, generally controlling play. When they were assembled last year under Bones, I think this is probably the kind of play that we had hoped they would have. They just didn't really have it, right? This year, I don't know what's changed. Maybe it's individual commitments more so from players like Connor that have really made the difference. Maybe that's why we're seeing them just play a lot better as a unit. Whatever the case may be, the last several games, they've been on a warpath. And even when they don't have maybe the best outings, they're usually doing enough to at least be break even. And, recently they've been outscoring their opponents by a pretty fair margin. Since the end of October, I think they've outscored their opponents something like 9-1, and I think that they've owned like a 56% expected goal share, which is great. That is exactly what you want from your top line. Maybe the individual scoring chances are a little more even just because their opponents are getting a fair number of shots against, but maybe they just aren't that dangerous, right? Winnipeg's top line is currently winning the high danger battle, and I think that that's more than anything else what you want to see. You can give up shots, but as long as they're not that dangerous, you're not too worried about it. What you want to do is outcreate in the more critical areas, and that's where the top line has generally been a lot stronger. So very encouraging to see that. Would really like it to continue going forward, and especially in this game, another tough road game. I think Tampa Bay probably ranks more in the middle of the pack in difficulty on this trip, especially without Point. Their defense, though, it's not bad. You've got Hedman and Moser on the first pairing, McDonough, perhaps Saranac if he's in on the second, and then Liljeberg and Perbix on the third. Again, I kind of feel like the Jets have the the staffing advantage here in terms of the quality of our D pairings versus theirs. I expect Sandberg and Pionk to get a big workout tonight. I think that they'll probably be mainstays for these shifts. Morrissey and DeMelo will probably go out there. Hopefully, they have a better outing than some of their recent games. Overall, though, I think that this game definitely favors the Jets. Winnipeg is certainly on the better form. They're the stronger team right now. Comrie will be in net for the Jets, so maybe the usual Hellebuck advantage doesn't apply here. But Comrie's been, pretty capable, so I'm not too worried about that. Winnipeg may only have to worry a little bit about, giving up power plays. I think that that's probably where Tampa Bay's most dangerous opportunities are going to come from. The Lightning still have a pretty decent power play. It's not what it once was, but it's dangerous enough to cause some issues. And Winnipeg's PK this year is really interesting. On the whole, the percentage is very good, but when you watch their individual PK attempts, there are some penalty kills where they're really active and generally shutting down and pressuring puck carriers really effectively. And then there are times where the lack of foot speed and mobility becomes a real problem, and they try to collapse into the slot and sort of do what they did in previous years when the PK unit was bad. On the whole, though, it's a lot better than it was regardless, right? In previous years, the PK unit was almost unusable. It was so bad. You might as well have just put no one out there, right? Just leave the goalie to be, a 5-on-0 because the Jets PK really couldn't do anything. They were completely ineffective, but they're a lot better this year. And so I think that that's a huge improvement. It should help in a game like this where, the power play may be Tampa Bay's best chance to get back in this game, especially if they're already trailing. But just one of those things you have to keep an eye out for. I'm sure as the Jets continue to get a little bit more comfortable and figure out what they can do and what they can get away with, we'll start to see this PK maybe gel a little more. But so far, pretty good early returns. If I have to give a score prediction for this game, I think the Jets win 4-2. I think either, whether it's Vasilevsky or somebody else in that, I would expect that it's going to be not necessarily like a super, super close game. I think the Jets are probably going to outplay Tampa Bay. But then again, it is a road game. Winnipeg has had a really long stretch of success recently. And at some point, they are going to lose a game, right? You almost think that they maybe should just to remind themselves that they're still mortal. They're racking up like 7-game win streaks like it's nothing. So pretty insane run, a chance to go for a win or add an 8th game to this win streak would be amazing. I believe that is the franchise record so far, so they'd at least tie that. And then they have a chance to break that over the weekend against, our old friends in the Florida Panthers. And I say old friends because, not only do they still have one or two Jets players hanging around, but of course, Paul Maurice, who still has a soft spot for Winnipeg, is still at the helm. So we'll chat about what to expect out of the Panthers game. Between these two, definitely going to be the harder of the two. I always say that, and then something crazy happens, and maybe the Jets have a tough outing against Tampa, and then absolutely beat the pants off the Panthers. But I would expect Florida to be a little bit more of a stiffer challenge, and we'll chat about why in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets when you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. They've also got other great sports like the MLB, NHL, auto racing, and so much more. Whatever you're into, they've got you covered. So when you're getting that hunch in the middle of a Jets game, maybe like tonight against Tampa Bay, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. And don't forget, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's all at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at SelectQuote. The World Series, Super Bowl, and the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: Teamwork. Teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with over 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. They want to help reward you because you invest so much time to take care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of you that you can be. And if you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. These policies are also more affordable than you think. You could get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. SelectQuote is here to help, and you can get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Hey, friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about Winnipeg's run through the Florida Panhandle. Obviously, a tough run of games here between Tampa and the Panthers. And then, of course, the Jets play the Panthers again next week or over the weekend at home, which should be very interesting. I think, for me, the Tampa Bay game is the more winnable of the two. And then, of course, the Panthers games are going to be a tougher stretch, right? The first game, of course, being this coming Saturday. And then next week on Tuesday, the Jets will play the Panthers in Winnipeg. So a bit of a home and home, if you will. Maybe a little bit more of a break in between. But in terms of what to expect from the Panthers, this is one of the top teams in the league. They are really good. They've got Barkov back. Sam Bennett may be a little bit of a question mark heading into Saturday, but assuming that he's in, your lines are looking like Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Reinhart, then Bokvist, Bennett, and Tkachuk, Luostarinen, Lundell, and Rodriguez on your third, Greer, Nosek, and Gadjevich on your fourth. On defense, they are just pretty dang deep. You've got Forsling and Ekblad, Mikkola and Kulikov, and then Schmidt and Belinsky's on your third. Our old friends in Kulikov and Schmidt, nice to see them again. And of course, Paul Maurice still there. This team, is just scary, right? If there's a squad out there that I think truly defines an elite cup contender, it's probably the Panthers. In my mind, I think that they might generally be the strongest team in the East. They've got one of the best records. Their offense continues to cook, and they are a Stanley Cup champion for a reason. This team is just really good, and I think if this is maybe a preview of a potential Stanley Cup final, it would be really fun if that were the case. Obviously, there is a lot of season left to go before we ever get to that. But the Panthers are one of those teams where if you're the Jets and you somehow make it all the way to the end, that is a good opponent that you could potentially see, a likely opponent, right? Again, the playoffs are always weird. Things happen. Random stuff gets in the way. But if there's a team out in the East that I think genuinely has one of the highest chances of making it all the way to the final dance, again, it's got to be the Panthers. They've already been there twice now in the last couple of years. They've won one. And so the Panthers are probably pretty fair bets to be a returning contender. And you look at this offense, and it's not shocking. Verhaeghe and Reinhart are kind of ridiculous. Reinhart, I feel like, just doesn't really get enough credit despite being one of the top goal scorers in the league. Verhaeghe, a former Lightning guy who's been immediately effective for the Panthers. They seemingly get, Tampa's cast-offs from cap situation stuff. And then, of course, because they're already good, they just start killing it for the Panthers. Tkachuk, of course, always a threat, a real pest and a real nuisance. You don't like him, but you would love to have him on your team. That continues to be the case. And who could ever, dismiss Barkov, right? Truly an elite first-line center and a guy who's just a real magician with a real sturdy frame. Very hard to knock off the puck. The thing that's going to make this game, I think, especially challenging for the Jets is that outside of the fourth line, there's just really no weaklings. The top nine is probably the deepest the Jets will face this year. Lundell being your third line center is kind of like having Lowry as your third line center, a guy that quite honestly produces right now at the level of a second liner, but is, secondary in the way that this top nine is going to be run. And Maurice likes to roll his lines, so you're going to be getting steady diets of all of these guys with, obviously a preference to that first line, but it's going to be a real tricky proposition. The Lowry line, in my mind, is going to have a really difficult assignment because, between the Barkov, Bennett, and Lundell lines, there's just not many easy matchups to win that you're going to have a clear-cut advantage. In fact, I don't think the Jets really do have a clear-cut advantage. I think this is going to be a tooth and nail battle all the way through. It's probably fair to say that this Panthers team is the best the Jets have faced so far this year. I don't know if there's a team that really has a claim to be better. With Winnipeg having the best record and everything, and right now kind of being the best team in the league, this is a phenomenal barometer test. The Jets obviously have like 7 more points. And so on paper, you'd think, how good is this Panthers team really in comparison? But they're 8-2-0 in their last 10 games. They have one of the more prolific offenses out there, not the top offense, surprisingly, and they do have a reputation for conceding a fair few number of goals. And so if you're thinking about a potential advantage, the Jets being generally stingy and also having stellar goaltending is really one of the big equalizers. The Jets have conceded among the fewest amount of goals in the league. I think that they are right around second to fewest. The only team that's conceded fewer somehow is Dallas, which is sitting at 33 goals against. But the Jets have only given up 34. Defensively, Winnipeg generally as a team pretty well structured, really not giving up tons. The PK again has also improved quite considerably, and at even strength, the Jets just aren't giving up all that much. And I think that leads me to, all to say that this is probably going to be a very back and forth, probably pretty even game. I think where I might wonder about the matchups is, top line versus top line. If the Scheifele line isn't able to slow down the Barkov line, that's going to be a really tough matchup. I think that's probably going to be the one where, in my mind, the Panthers have a pretty fair advantage. I know that the top line for the Jets has played well recently, but I do think that, the Panthers have a bit more speed, and that could be a bit of a tricky proposition. And then the Nemestikov line is going to have to, score off against the Tkachuk line, which, Ehlers and Perfetti have been really good recently. Nemestikov has done okay, but I think you're starting to notice that, he is looking like a 33-year-old, and he's not keeping up with the same pace that he used to be. Is it going to be the be-all, end-all for this game? Probably not. But I do think it's just something to keep in mind. The Nemestikov line as a whole has been pretty strong recently. But again, I think one thing for the Jets is that a lot of the opponents in the first half of this early start to the season, they were not particularly good. Now the Jets are really getting into the heart of a very difficult stretch, and it's just not going to get easier from here, right? And so Winnipeg's going to have to put on its A game. It's going to have to be at its absolute best, and you're on the road in Florida against the Panthers, one of the top teams out there. It's going to be a tough game, but I think, a lot of squads are now afraid of the Jets, and rightfully so. Winnipeg has so far answered every question, ignoring the Toronto game because I feel like that was more of a one-off. Winnipeg has generally just had the run of form against a lot of these really good teams. They embarrassed Dallas. I think in many ways they outplayed the Rangers. And so, the Jets have a pretty successful formula. I think they have a really good chance to repeat it here. I think if it looks more like the Colorado game, you may not like the scoreline at the end of it, but we'll see, right? The Jets, again, like I said, have answered many of the questions that have been posed to them. They've looked very strong. Not a ton of reason to think that that's going to change a lot. I kind of feel like this is one of those 50-50 games, a bit of a coin flip. Could go either way. I think, to be honest, I do think the Panthers win this one, but it's going to be close, like 4-3 or 5-4, something like that. But I think the Panthers might have the edge in this one, but would love for the Jets to come out with a huge victory. They have generally played the Panthers well in the past, and I think I'd have to look at what the record split is once Paul Maurice took over, because the Panthers have been good for a while now, but I think the Jets have generally had most of the matchup wins. So let's cross our fingers and hope that trend continues. Every win that the Jets add, to this current streak of history just makes it that much more unattainable for teams in the future to really start out the season with anywhere near the record Winnipeg has. I mean, 15-1-0 already, chance to go 16-1-0 tonight, pending what happens against Tampa. You go into Panthers land and you somehow end up 17-1-0. Wow. No one, I think, is ever getting to that point again. It'd be almost impossible for anyone to do what the Jets are doing right now with their current record. So, adding another little piece of history to that long running streak would be fantastic. And the Jets would also at that point have a 9-game winning streak. So that'd be pretty freaking fantastic if you ask me. But still a long ways to go, still a road ahead. And I think Winnipeg's not taking anything for granted. You've heard from some of the players that they're not ready to rest. They're not happy until they're hoisting that cup. I think DeMelo said it best. We haven't done anything yet. We haven't proven anything yet. And I think that that's the best mindset to approach every single game, because the Jets still have so much room for growth, have room to get even better, be an even bigger pain in the butt for opponents. And, it's just nice to really see that they are locked in. I think the ending of last season really pissed them off. I know for a lot of fans, it probably pissed us off. And so it's good to see that they are really answering the bell, and they've already stepped up their game considerably to start the year. They're not waiting to get up to speed. They just hit the ground running because they have a point to prove. And if they beat the Panthers on the weekend, that would just be one more notch in an already impressive record to start the season. But one thing that I alluded to earlier that's maybe a little bit concerning is the Jets' defense, and more specifically, Dylan DeMelo. His performance recently has not been so great. I want to chat about that in just a quick moment. Before we chat about what has maybe worked well for him and what's maybe been a bit of a concern, just wanted to let you know about our friends and partners at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports available to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. If you're wondering why you should choose PrizePicks, it's because they always put their customers first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you can get your money in as little as 15 minutes. They even offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account, especially as the action heats up. And if you have an injury in the middle of a matchup, no worries. Say, Hellebuck or something comes out of a game prematurely, PrizePicks will still keep your lineup live. They also have their flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can even double your money while one of your picks doesn't hit. And if you get as few as 4 correct picks, you could win up to 100 times your money with PrizePicks. If you sign up today, you'll even get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's just guaranteed. If you are wondering who you might choose in tonight's game, I would say Morrissey and Scheifele, 1.5 points, go for the over. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Both have been scoring quite frequently. Maybe Kyle Connor too. I know that I've maybe gotten his wrong recently because the past couple of games until the other one, his previous game, he had a bit of a scoreless streak, but it feels like he's primed to score something. So he could also be a pretty decent bet. But the only way you can do so is to download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up really quickly with some final thoughts on something that's maybe been a little bit of a point of concern. Generally speaking, the Jets really haven't worried about anything. The team has really been cruising, not really many setbacks or worries. But the only thing I think that has really stood out is more on the defense, and specifically the DeMelo and Morrissey pairing, which we've mentioned before. It's really struggled, and I think a lot of it is because DeMelo himself has had a rough start to the season. I don't quite know what's going on with him. Last year he had a bit of a dip, and then he sort of recovered form towards the end of the second half of the season. But this year, he's just really not been the same player. In fact, he at times has been one of our worst defenders. And, it's to me, it's actively dragging Morrissey down too. Together, they're both just really struggling. I don't really like to put it in those terms, but I feel like that's just how it's been. Typically DeMelo is a great, great partner. He's very stable, reliable, a guy who you can basically count on as sort of like an every down, every shift kind of defender. And this year, that's really not been the case. He's been prone to some really bad turnovers. The passing has not been there. The skating under pressure has been ugly. He just turns it over routinely, and he's had trouble with his defensive reads. It's just not been great. I don't know why he's suddenly looking like this. I don't know if it's just maybe a temporary slow start. Maybe he's not getting enough sleep because he's got a brand new kid again. Maybe he's got a nagging injury of some sort. Whatever it is, if he doesn't figure it out soon, that's going to be a little bit of a concern. DeMelo is one of those guys that the Jets really lean on for everything. Your PK, your 5v5 play, he's just instrumental in being Morrissey's safety valve, right? He is that guy for the Jets. If that is something the Jets can no longer rely upon, I don't really know how you solve that. Miller could be an option to maybe try and get up there and get some minutes, but I think they tend to look at him very clearly as a third pairing guy. He's playing like 10 minutes a night. So, I don't quite know how you deal with this. DeMelo is a guy who's a really big leader in the room, and clearly one of the on ice leaders. And if he's struggling, the coaching staff has to probably see the same things that a lot of us do. I just don't know if it's age related or if it's just a temporary issue. The more I'm seeing, I lean towards it not really being a temporary problem. I get the sense that this is just starting to become his normal. And I thought, he is getting up there in years. He has logged a fair few miles. And maybe, in the next year or two, you'd start to see him slow it down a bit. But I feel like the slowdown may be happening faster than expected, which is going to be really rough for the Jets. DeMelo is a guy that I think they figure to be a really prominent part of this blue line. And if you already have to start maybe reducing his minutes, that's going to ask a lot of some of the other guys. Now, I guess you could look at Miller maybe. I guess the other positive spin is that Salamanson with the Moose has been really good. And so maybe, you sort of weather it this year and then maybe next year see if Salamanson wins a spot out of camp. But I don't know. For me, it's concerning because the Morrissey DeMelo pair is like the one that the Jets have typically made their focal point. And if it's not a unit that you can really trust, I don't really know how you game plan around that. Morrissey Miller would be one I'd definitely be interested in trying. Sandberg and Pionk are probably playing about as much and as well as you could possibly ask. I don't think that giving them even more is going to fix the problem. So again, it's not like a world-ending thing necessarily, but it is an issue that's kind of compounded when you have extended shifts from maybe your top line or one of your other lines that's struggling defensively to get out of their own end. If your D pairing really can't help with that, it's going to handcuff you a bit. And I think that's something that's shown up a couple of times at the start of the season. And I love DeMelo, but if he really is starting to slow down, the Jets are going to have to start reducing his minutes too. If he can't play top pairing minutes, Winnipeg's going to have to figure something out that can still make him an impact player who's really good for this team, but maybe just ask him to shoulder less of the responsibility right now. It's a tough thing and a tough question. I don't think it has easy answers. And this is maybe where the Jets start thinking about trading for a defender at some point. Marcus Pettersson was actually linked to the Jets earlier today. He's a name that I've thought about too. The only thing is that he's a lefty, and I don't really know what he's like on his offhand. Traditionally, you don't really want to play D on their offhand because it does limit their effectiveness a bit. They are just noticeably worse on their not strong side. So I don't know how I feel about that. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess. In my mind, I think, the Jets are going to want to try and keep the pairings as balanced as possible, try to keep everyone on their strong side and go with that. But I don't know. DeMelo, I'm hoping that this is just a temporary setback, that this is not him going forward. If it is, his contract extension just started, and that could be a bit of a tough pill to swallow. But, it is what it is. Every team at some point has to go through the same process. And so I'm just hoping with DeMelo, he'll start to polish up here over the next few weeks, and all of this ends up just sort of blowing over. not really a concern. But we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But obviously, it's not an immediate fix. It's not going to be something that gets resolved super quickly. But like I said, probably just needs to be something that you have a little bit of patience with, and we'll see what shakes out. But I'm sure Chevy's already thinking about what to do with that particular question. But we'll have to wait again. Obviously, up first, we've just got to get through a couple of really big games on the road. We will have coverage of what happened in Winnipeg versus Tampa on tomorrow's episode. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow with even more Jets coverage. So see you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.